The rumble of the heavy equipment was a visceral thing, shaking the very earth beneath Alex's steel-toed boots. It was the sound of liability dissolving, the deep, satisfying thump of the excavator bucket against the coping marking the end of 5 months of agonizing neighborhood tension. The pool had been the primary reason the previous owner had sold the house cheap. A gorgeous, kidney-shaped disaster, built sometime in the mid-70s. Nestled precariously close to the boundary line that separated his quarter-acre from Patricia Vance's perfectly manicured fortress next door. It leaked, the filtration system was a relic, and the maintenance bills were astronomical. More importantly, it was a safety hazard, and Alex, a man who believed in clean breaks and zero risk, had secured all necessary permits to fill it in. He watched the first, decisive strike, the edge of the pool deck, a slab of sun-bleached aggregate, shattering like glass. And that's when Patricia Vance materialized. She didn't just walk out, she erupted. She came sprinting across her lawn in an expensive linen sundress and designer sunglasses, a vision of affluent rage. Her perfect blonde hair was askew, and the phone she held was already pressed to her ear. "Stop! I said stop this industrial desecration immediately!" Her voice, normally a controlled, sharp alto, was high-pitched and frantic, cutting effortlessly through the diesel engine noise. Alex sighed, pulling his safety glasses down around his neck. He'd prepared for this. He'd tried to warn her. He had sent certified letters. He walked toward the chain-link temporary fence separating his demolition zone from his neighbor's yard, raising his hands in a gesture of peace that he knew would be ignored. "Patricia, we've been over this. The city approved the demolition permit 2 weeks ago. I gave you written notice. The crew is working. Please stay behind the fence." She slammed her hand against the metal mesh, her knuckles white. "Notice? You call a pathetic little form letter a notice? You call destroying a vital neighborhood structure working? This is malicious vandalism, Alex. This pool has been used by this community, by my family, for 40 years. It's been used by your family because the previous owner was elderly and you manipulated her into letting you use it," Alex retorted, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline starting to spike. "And it's on my property. Every inch of that pool deck and equipment pad is inside my legal boundary. I showed you the survey markers. Your little stakes mean nothing," she shrieked, tears now welling in her eyes, smudging her expensive mascara, an impressive feat of immediate emotional breakdown. "This is a clear case of adverse possession. My children learned to swim in that pool. My husband proposed to me right there on the diving board. This is not just concrete, Alex, this is history. And you are ruining it because you're a selfish, miserly newcomer who hates joy." The operator, a massive man named Rico, paused the excavator and leaned out of the cab, looking at Alex questioningly. Alex waved a hand, signaling him to wait. This had to be resolved before the heavy work continued. "Patricia, you have access to a country club pool 5 minutes away. You have a massive home, and if you want a pool, you can build your own. This pool is cracked, leaking 10,000 gallons a week, and I am not spending $50,000 to repair a pool I don't want." "It's our pool," she insisted, her voice breaking on a sob that sounded eerily rehearsed. She pulled her phone away from her ear, her eyes wide and dangerously bright. "The police are on their way, Alex. I told them you are threatening me and intentionally destroying property that is subject to a legal decades-old easement agreement. You're going to be arrested." Alex felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The easement agreement was her constant refrain. When he first bought the house, she'd provided him with a photocopied handwritten note, signed by both previous homeowners, granting her unrestricted recreational access to the pool. Alex's lawyer had laughed, explaining that a non-recorded, non-transferable personal agreement had died the moment the original owner sold the property. "Bring the police, Patricia. I have the title, the deed, the survey, and the city permit. You have a 40-year-old scrap of paper that means nothing now." Her eyes narrowed to slits. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You arrogant little man. You think you can just march in here and erase my life?" "Fine. You want to proceed? You'll have to go through me." She dropped her phone. It clattered onto the paving stones. Still connected to 911, and then, in a shocking burst of physical strength, she clambered over the low chain-link fence. Rico gasped from the cab. Patricia didn't stop. She ran straight to the massive yellow arm of the excavator and wrapped her arms around the hydraulic piston, effectively making herself a human shield. "If you strike this pool one more time, I will claim you struck me," she screamed up at Rico. Alex felt a wave of cold dread wash over him. This had gone from a property dispute to a genuine crisis. He sprinted forward. "Patricia, get away from the machinery. That is a 20-ton piece of equipment. You'll be killed." "Good," she wailed, leaning her head against the cold steel. "Let them see what a monster you are. Let them see what happens when the little people fight back." The sirens were audible now, growing rapidly louder from the main street. Rico had shut the engine off completely. The sudden silence was suffocating, broken only by Patricia's ragged, dramatic sobs. Alex stepped back, placing both hands on his head. He was minutes away from being detained because his neighbor had committed industrial obstruction in a fit of manufactured martyrdom. He was trying to be the adult in the room, but Patricia had turned the room into a psychological emergency. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt at the curb. 2 officers emerged, Officer Chen, young and serious, and Officer Ramirez, older, tired, and sporting the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen too many HOA meetings turn into felonies. Ramirez approached the scene first, assessing the tableau: the massive excavator, the half-demolished pool, the distraught woman clinging to the machinery, and Alex, looking like a man who was about to spontaneously combust. "Ma'am, step away from the equipment," Ramirez ordered, his voice flat and authoritative. "Sir, what is going on here?" Alex took a deep breath. "This is my property, officer. I have a demolition permit for this in-ground pool. She is the neighbor, Patricia Vance. She is attempting to obstruct construction, and she climbed the fence to use herself as leverage against the machinery." Patricia immediately released the machine, staggering back dramatically and pointing a shaky finger at Alex. "He's lying. He is tearing up a shared utility. I have an easement. He started this demolition without warning, purely to retaliate because I complained about his trash cans last week." Officer Chen went to speak to Rico, the operator, while Ramirez turned to Alex. "I need to see documentation, sir. Title, survey, and the permit. Everything." Alex calmly walked to his truck, retrieved a large accordion file, and handed the packet to Ramirez. Ramirez, ever the professional, spread the documents out on the hood of the patrol car. The property deed, the city permit stamped and dated by the Planning Commission, and the detailed recent land survey. Patricia, seeing this, scrambled back to her side of the fence and triumphantly held up her own creased old papers. "And I have the original agreement. It proves my rights! They go back further than his deed." Ramirez methodically reviewed Alex's documents first. He compared the lot number on the deed to the permit, then checked the survey against the permanent boundary pin visible in the corner of Alex's lot. He spent a solid 30 seconds reading the description of Alex's property lines. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant traffic and Patricia's heavy performative breathing. When he looked up, the tiredness in Officer Ramirez's eyes was gone. It was replaced by a look of sharp, clinical concentration, a focus that made Alex's blood run cold. Ramirez turned slowly, ignoring Patricia's triumphant smirk, and looked past the fence, past the half-destroyed pool, and focused on the very corner of Alex's lot, then back at the plat map he held, then back at the pool. He didn't speak to Alex. He didn't speak to Chen. He looked directly at Patricia, who was still leaning against the fence, arms crossed, ready for her inevitable vindication. Ramirez slowly rolled up the survey and the map, securing them under his arm. He adjusted his belt and stepped closer to Patricia, his voice dropping to a low, chilling register that carried a weight heavier than the 20-ton excavator. "Ms. Vance," he said, his gaze fixed on her face. "The problem isn't the easement. The problem isn't the demolition permit. The problem is what this survey indicates about your own property line. Can you tell me exactly how long that small shed at the rear of your yard has been there?" The question blindsided her. Patricia's confident smile instantly evaporated, replaced by a sudden, terrifying blankness. Alex, standing nearby, didn't understand. Why was he talking about her shed? But the way Patricia froze, her eyes darting between the officer and her small, innocuous storage shed, told Alex that the pool was just the first layer of a much deeper, much more consequential truth that was about to break the surface. The silence that followed Officer Ramirez's question was profound, a vacuum sucking the sound out of the already tense suburban air. Patricia Vance was no longer the screaming, imperious woman clinging to construction equipment. She was a statue carved from sudden cold dread. Her eyes were fixed on the small, innocuous-looking wooden shed at the back corner of her meticulously kept yard. The same shed that had been there, painted a calming sage green since Alex first moved in. "The shed?" she finally whispered. The feigned drama completely gone, replaced by a thin, reedy terror. "What does the shed have to do with anything?" "This is about his criminal destruction of property," she tried to rally, pulling her shoulders back, but her voice cracked. "Officer Ramirez." His demeanor, now that of a seasoned investigator who had found the smoking gun in a trivial case, didn't raise his voice. He simply held up the laminated plat map from Alex's survey. "Ma'am, when your neighbor paid for this professional survey, it confirmed the legal metes and bounds of Lot 14, which is Mr. Lawson's property. His property line runs directly from the boundary pin at the street corner straight back to the rear easement." He tapped a ruler against the glass of the map, tracing the line. "The line separating Lot 14 and Lot 15, which is yours, passes directly through the location of that shed. The shed is not merely close to the line, Ms. Vance. According to this certified document, your shed sits approximately 3 feet onto Mr. Lawson's legal property." Alex stared. The pool had consumed all his attention for months. He had never once considered the small shed. Assuming it was fully on her side, shielded from his view by the high, lush hedge they shared, Patricia Vance made a desperate, audible sound, a strangled little gasp that was pure. Unedited panic. "That's impossible," she choked out, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "That shed was here when we bought the house 20 years ago. It belongs to the property. It's grandfathered." "Property theft isn't grandfathered, Ms. Vance," Ramirez stated, a flash of irritation finally entering his tone. "And the deed and survey are clear. That is technically a structure built without a permit on property you do not legally own. That is encroachment. And frankly, given how passionately you just fought for adverse possession of Mr. Lawson's pool, I find it highly suspicious that you didn't know your own property markers." Officer Chen, who had been listening intently, walked over from the excavator. "Rico says the pool was being filled because the previous owner, Mrs. Miller, was facing a massive insurance fine. He said he saw Ms. Vance here try to pull the breaker on the machinery before we arrived. It's not theft." Patricia was practically vibrating with fear now, her carefully constructed image of righteous victimhood dissolving into genuine legal terror. We never moved it. It's a garden shed. It holds fertilizer and tools. This is a simple mistake. I'll move it. I'll have it moved tomorrow, I swear." Alex found his voice, slow and measured, the shock wearing off to be replaced by a cold, righteous certainty. "You knew about the survey, Patricia. I sent you a copy when I was negotiating the demolition permits for the pool back in March. The map clearly shows the boundary line." She turned on him, her eyes blazing. But the fire was now defensive, not aggressive. "I didn't look at the fine print. I was focused on the pool. The pool is the issue. This shed, it's immaterial, is it?" Ramirez countered, folding his arms. "You filed a false police report claiming destruction of your property and falsely claimed easement rights to obstruct a legal construction project. Now we find you have been knowingly, or at least negligently, encroaching on your neighbor's land for 2 decades, likely increasing the appraised value of your own property by using his square footage." He looked at Chen. "Call for backup. We need to secure the scene for potential evidence." Patricia Vance looked like she might pass out. "Evidence? Officer, you can't be serious. It's a wooden shed. I will dismantle it by hand right now." "Why so panicked about a simple shed, Ms. Vance?" Alex asked, stepping closer to the fence, his own suspicions spiking. Her reaction was entirely disproportionate to a minor boundary mistake. If it truly only held fertilizer, she would be angry, but not this hysterical. "If it's just a garden shed, why are you offering to dismantle it yourself right now?" The color drained from Patricia's face. She looked at the shed, then at Alex, then at the officers, and then, a desperate strategy flashing in her eyes, she pulled out her final, most potent weapon: her family. My husband. Call my husband William Vance! He handles all the property matters. He is a senior partner at Crawford Hayes and Vance. He can explain everything. We'll be happy to speak with him, Ramirez said calmly. But you need to understand the situation now. You are obstructing an investigation and impeding construction based on a boundary line you yourself have violated. Mr. Lawson, I'm advising you to continue your demolition of the pool. Ms. Vance, you need to step back. If you cross that fence again, you will be arrested for trespass and obstruction. Alex hesitated. The thought of setting the excavator back to work while Patricia was having a genuine nervous breakdown felt brutally cold, but he knew he couldn't show weakness now. He nodded firmly to Rico, the operator. Rico, clearly energized by the dramatic reversal of fortunes, fired up the huge diesel engine. The noise roared back to life, an oppressive mechanical sound of unstoppable force. The excavator arm swung, the industrial claw scraping metal against the remaining pool deck. Patricia screamed again, but this time it was not a cry of rage but of defeat, a primal sound of a world cracking apart. She didn't move toward the machine. She stumbled backward, her gaze locked onto the small sage-green shed. Ramirez watched her reaction, his eyes narrowing further. The panic wasn't about the pool anymore. It was about the shed. He signaled Chen, and they walked around the fence line onto Patricia's property, moving directly toward the shed that now represented the sudden, sharp edge of the truth. Ms. Vance, you are going to open that shed for us now, Ramirez commanded. No! You have no warrant! You can't search my property! She cried, scrambling to follow them, her expensive shoes kicking up divots in her prize-winning lawn. We don't need a warrant to inspect a structure. We have probable cause to believe is illegally built on the neighboring lot and may contain evidence related to a false report and obstruction, Chen said, now speaking into his shoulder radio. We've got a 1054 on Lot 15, possibly involving zoning and encroachment violations. Requesting a city inspector and K9 unit for perimeter check. K9 unit? Alex thought, watching from his side of the fence. A garden shed doesn't require a dog unit. Ramirez reached the shed door. It was secured by a heavy, modern-looking steel padlock that looked entirely out of place on the rustic wooden structure. Open it, Ms. Vance. Patricia stopped 10 feet away, trembling violently. I lost the key. It hasn't been opened in years. Ramirez looked at the lock, then back at Patricia's terrified face. He slowly drew a set of industrial-grade bolt cutters from his tool belt. We can do this the easy way, or we can cut it open and add breaking and entering tools to the inventory of this unauthorized structure. Your choice. Patricia let out a sob, covering her face with her hands. Will is going to kill me. He's going to kill me. As the steel jaws of the bolt cutters closed around the thick shackle of the lock, the sound was louder, sharper, and far more definitive than the roar of the excavator still chewing through the pool deck. Snap. The lock fell to the grass. Ramirez gripped the handle and pulled the shed door open. What spilled out was not bags of fertilizer or rusty garden hose. The interior was dark, but a sickeningly sweet, humid smell immediately hit the air. A heavy chemical scent masked by the faint, cloying odor of chlorine carried over from the nearby pool. The small space was clearly partitioned, with a makeshift air duct leading from the floorboard. But it was the array of high-wattage heat lamps and the bright green, carefully cultivated foliage crammed inside that made Alex freeze and Ramirez take a sharp, protective step back. Well, I'll be, Ramirez murmured, pulling his sidearm as a matter of protocol, though the shed was clearly empty of people. His voice crackled over the radio. Code 6, Code 6. Possible 1140 on Lot 15. We have a grow operation, possibly serious. Secure the property perimeter now. Patricia Vance collapsed onto her knees on the lawn, her cries now reaching a fever pitch, entirely different from the manufactured hysteria of the pool fight. It was the sound of her meticulously crafted life shattering, all because Alex decided to fill in a leaky swimming pool. The pool was just the decoy, a monument to a lie designed to distract from the small, illegal enterprise she had been running literally on the edge of her neighbor's property for years. The true gravity of the situation, the irony, the shocking karma, hit Alex like a physical blow. He hadn't just removed a pool. He had dismantled the very foundation of his neighbor's illicit income, a truth hidden by a tiny, misplaced shed and the colossal, attention-grabbing spectacle of the swimming pool. The roar of the excavator claw tearing into the pool deck faded into the background, becoming a mere industrial hum compared to the screech of tires as a sleek, black Mercedes sedan, polished to a mirror shine, slid sideways to a stop on the curb. William Vance, senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, emerged like a predator disturbed from its hunt. He was the physical opposite of his wife's hysterical theatrics. Tall, immaculately tailored in a dark gray suit with silver hair meticulously combed back. His face, usually a mask of calm, professional command, was tight with barely suppressed fury. He didn't look at the police cars, the flashing lights, or the crime scene tape that was already being unfurled around the sage-green shed. He looked straight at Alex, standing by the fence line, and his eyes promised annihilation. "Mr. Lawson!" William's voice was a low, dangerous growl completely devoid of the usual pleasantries neighbors exchanged. "You have made a profound mistake. A civil matter is now a circus. Your frivolous, reckless actions have led to police involvement on private property." He strode past Alex, ignoring his presence, and went directly to Officer Ramirez, who was documenting the shed's interior, the sickly sweet smell of the hidden grow operation mingling with the fresh scent of mulch. "Officer, I am William Vance. I represent my wife and myself. This entire situation is the result of an overzealous neighbor, Alex Lawson, who is intentionally engaging in harassment and destruction. We demand that you cease and desist all searches, and that you leave this property immediately. Any evidence gathered here is fruit of the poisonous tree, a search based on a baseless complaint about a pool." Ramirez didn't even look up. "Mr. Vance, we are investigating a felony grow operation found in an illegal structure that encroached on Mr. Lawson's land. Furthermore, your wife, Patricia, filed a false report and attempted to obstruct police and industrial work. You are currently impeding a police investigation. I advise you to step back and contact your criminal defense attorney. We are securing this scene." William's jaw muscles bunched, a flicker of genuine alarm crossing his face as he finally registered the density of the foliage and the heat lamps inside the small space. His corporate lawyer confidence wavered, but only for a second before the practiced lawyer in him took over. "This is absurd. This is a setup. My wife is highly emotional, yes, but she runs a garden club. This is a few plants, probably for botanical research. It is Alex Lawson who should be the focus. He's the one destroying historical property without proper due diligence. We have an easement." "Sir, the easement you claim is a non-recorded, non-transferable personal agreement that expired with the previous owner's sale," Alex interjected calmly from the fence, holding up his own copy of the lawyer's opinion. "And that historical property is structurally unsound and on my lot. Your shed is on my lot. Your wife lied to 911. William turned on Alex, his fury now volcanic. "You think you're smart, Lawson? You think this ends with a congratulations from the police? You have just dragged my family, my firm, and my reputation into a public spectacle over a damned pool. I will bury you in litigation so deep you'll be paying my legal fees until you're 70. I will find every permit violation, every code infringement on your property, and I will make you wish you never bought this house. If that shed is just botanical research, why did your wife panic and mention you would kill her?" Alex shot back, unwilling to be intimidated. Officer Chen, having finished his preliminary evidence inventory, walked over holding a small digital camera. "Mr. Vance, we have found several anomalies here beyond the crop. The air conditioning unit feeding this structure is a direct illegal tap into the main power line, bypassing your meter. That's utility theft. Also, there's evidence of chemical wastewater drainage. We're going to need to lift this structure to check the foundation and any possible connections to the main house or the abandoned pool's utility lines." The mention of the pool's utility lines made William blanch. He looked at the massive, gaping hole in the ground that used to be a pool, then back at the shed sitting precariously close to it. "You are not touching that structure," William roared, his voice finally losing its practiced polish and cracking under the pressure. "That is still a legal structure regardless of its location. You need a specialized warrant to physically alter the structure of a building." It's a wooden box on skids built illegally on land you don't own, Ramirez corrected dryly. We're seizing it as evidence of utility theft, property encroachment, and potential felony drug cultivation. You can talk to the DA, Mr. Vance. As Ramirez signaled the backup crew to prepare for the shed's removal, William's phone rang. He snatched it, his hand trembling, and put it to his ear, his back to Alex and the police. Hello? What? You're joking. How? How did they link the accounts already? He listened for a moment, his face turning an ashen gray that made his suit look several shades darker. He looked utterly defeated, not by the police, but by the distant voice on the line. No, tell them I was dealing with a family emergency, a property dispute. I'm on my way. Don't sign anything. He snapped the phone shut, staring blankly at the pool demolition pit, the source of all his ruin. The pool, the very thing Patricia had claimed as a legacy, was a giant, gaping distraction. The shed, the tiny wedge of land stolen from Alex, was the exposed nerve. He looked at Alex one last time, a look of pure, agonizing hatred mixed with a bizarre sense of recognition. You think you won, Lawson. You think a survey and a few plants are the end game. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. He turned on his heel, his expensive suit now seeming to sag, and marched back to his car, leaving his hysterical wife and his felony charge behind, because something far more important had just been compromised: his financial empire. Part 4. The ledger William Vance's abrupt and panicked departure left Patricia Vance sobbing uncontrollably on her front lawn, now flanked by 2 more uniformed officers. The scene had morphed from a local spat into a full-blown police operation. A utility crew was already on site, tracing the illegal power bypass, and a K-9 unit was sniffing the perimeter, drawn to the heavy, sweet scent emanating from the open shed. Alex felt a strange mix of nauseating fear and exhilarating vindication. The legal threats, the character assassination, it had all evaporated the moment the police discovered the truth. He stood on his side of the fence, watching the officers carefully dismantle the interior of the shed. Mr. Lawson, Officer Ramirez called over. We're going to need access to your side for a moment. We're moving the shed completely off your property and onto Lot 15. We need to check the ground where it was sitting. Of course, Alex said, feeling a surge of nervous curiosity. Rico, the excavator operator, used a small tow cable to gingerly pull the shed backward onto Patricia's property. As the shed slid away, the small patch of exposed earth beneath it was revealed. The ground was visibly disturbed, with signs of makeshift, shallow digging and crude piping. Ramirez knelt, scraping away some of the loose dirt with a gloved hand. We thought it was just utility theft, he muttered to Chen. But look at this, buried just beneath the surface, where the shed's floorboards had hidden it for decades, was a narrow, heavy-gauge PVC pipe separate from the main water line. It didn't lead to the house or the main sewer. Instead, it ran directly out towards the center of the yard, aiming straight for the massive, half-demolished pool. This is an external drainage line, maybe for the chemical runoff, Chen suggested, pulling on the pipe. No, it's too thick for simple drainage. And look at the joint, Ramirez said, pointing to a section of pipe sealed with heavy electrical tape and some sort of sealant. It looks like it was meant to be accessed. Maybe a conduit for something else. Alex, fascinated, pointed to a small, almost undetectable discoloration in the exposed clay where the pipe originated. A small indentation shaped like a narrow, rectangular box. Look, right there, near where the corner post of the shed was. It looks like something else was buried flush with the ground. Ramirez and Chen carefully dug at the spot, using small hand trowels. The clay was packed hard, but after a minute, Ramirez hit something solid. He carefully excavated the object. A small, weathered metal box, roughly the size of a large book, heavily wrapped in multiple layers of plastic sheeting, meticulously taped and sealed. A hush fell over the scene, even the utility workers stopping to watch. This was no longer about a property line. It was about organized secrecy. Ramirez carefully sliced through the thick plastic layers with a utility knife. Inside, the metal box was slightly corroded, but the contents were pristine. It contained a single, compact, leather-bound ledger. Ramirez opened it. The pages were filled with neat, handwritten entries. not in Patricia's sprawling script, but in a precise, almost clinical hand, numbers, dates, currency amounts, initials, and location codes, all cross-referenced with bank transfers and offshore account numbers. It was a meticulous, decades-long accounting record of profits, distribution, and payouts. Ramirez sucked in a sharp breath. "This isn't about a local grow-op," he said, his voice dropping low, his eyes scanning the columns. "This is a full-scale distribution chain. Look at these amounts. Look at the international transfers." The ledger wasn't just a record of cannabis sales. It detailed a sophisticated L. The arrival of the black, unmarked SUVs was quiet yet definitive, slicing through the suburban tension with the cold efficiency of a surgical strike. The scene instantly transformed from a local police action into a highly coordinated federal operation. FBI and IRS criminal investigation agents, wearing dark jackets and carrying briefcases, descended upon the Vance property and Alex's demolition site. Officer Ramirez, having secured the ledger, handed it over to a stern-faced FBI agent named Special Agent Kinsley. He then turned to Alex, the weariness having returned to his eyes, now mixed with a deep professional respect. "Mr. Lawson, you are no longer a property owner with a neighbor dispute," Ramirez stated, his voice low. "You are the primary witness in a multi-jurisdictional financial crime and drug investigation. Everything you saw, everything you heard, it is now evidence. You need to come with them." Alex felt a sudden, suffocating panic. He had wanted quiet. He had wanted to remove a pool. He was now staring at a life-altering consequence of his decision. "Come with them where?" "I need to stay here." "I'm filling in the pool." Special Agent Kinsley stepped forward, her gaze intense and unwavering. "Mr. Lawson, the work stops now. Your property is part of a federally secured crime scene until we've determined the full extent of the activity here. We believe the pool's utility lines and possibly the foundation of the pool itself were used to manage the runoff or supply the shed. You will be debriefed and secured. Given the nature of William Vance's firm and the potential international links in that ledger, your safety is now a priority." He had won the property dispute, but lost his solitude. The realization was a heavy sinking stone in his stomach. Alex watched as Special Agent Kinsley's team systematically swarmed the Vance house, sealing doors and windows with official tape. Patricia Vance, who had been sitting hunched over in the back of a patrol car, was formally placed under arrest, charged with obstruction, and led away, her face pale, silent, and finally stripped of all pretense. The sight of her, the infamous Karen, the neighborhood terror, now just a common criminal, was the first bittersweet taste of justice. Alex spent the next 3 weeks in a haze of interviews, financial forensics, and security briefings. The full scope of the Vance operation was staggering. The shed wasn't just a place to grow. It was a secure data drop-off and a staging point for cash deliveries, the ledger detailing millions laundered through complex property holdings and shell corporations managed by William Vance's firm. The initials WV in the ledger referred not to William Vance himself, but to the code name of the operation's originator, Vance's Wedge, referencing the 3 feet of stolen land that housed the entire operation's physical evidence. The original pool, the supposed historical landmark, turned out to be the ultimate smokescreen. Alex learned from the federal agents that the previous owner, Mrs. Miller, hadn't just been old and manipulated by Patricia. She had been paid a substantial, untraceable cash sum years ago to sign the fake easement and to allow the installation of the illegal drain and power bypass, all while the pool's massive maintenance costs ensured it remained a conspicuous, distracting liability. When Mrs. Miller tried to sell, the Vances panicked, viewing Alex's purchase as a fatal threat to their hidden infrastructure, forcing Patricia's extreme defense of the pool. William Vance, in the meantime, had vanished. The phone call he received during his confrontation with Alex was from a subordinate informing him that the IRS had frozen all accounts linked to the shell companies. Realizing the shed and the ledger were compromised, William attempted to flee the country, but the immediate alert triggered by Agent Kinsley's team and the information in the ledger led to his capture at a private airfield just hours later. The final decisive beat came 3 months later. Alex's backyard was finally his again. The FBI cleanup team, after meticulously excavating and documenting the hidden pipes and ground disturbances, had filled the pool cavity with clean, compacted fill dirt. The once bright turquoise disaster was gone, replaced by a smooth, grassy mound. One cold afternoon, Alex watched from his kitchen window as a crew from the U.S. Marshals Service placed large, printed signs onto the meticulously maintained lawn of the Vance property. The signs declared the seizure of the property, Lot 15, due to forfeiture tied to extensive racketeering and financial crimes. As the sun set, casting long purple shadows across the neighborhood, Alex walked out to his newly filled-in backyard. The property line, surveyed and now officially recognized, was crisp and clear. The small, quiet victory he had sought, a clean, safe yard, had been achieved, but at the cost of uncovering a nightmare. Looking across the line at the desolate, seized mansion next door, Alex realized the full, cold irony of Patricia's last stand. She hadn't lost the fight over the pool. She had lost the fight over 3 feet of dirt. The pool, the thing she used to justify her rage and her lies, had been removed by the law, and in its absence, the truth, buried right where she had illegally claimed space, was revealed. He finally had peace, but it was the silence that follows an explosion. He realized that sometimes the simple, sensible act of fixing a leaky pool is enough to drain the swamp of a corrupt empire. The Vances had believed their power and position made them untouchable, but in the end, they were undone by a survey, an encroaching shed, and one neighbor who simply wanted his quiet backyard back.